Tonight in a television exclusive, allegations of church sex abuse at Jesuit High School.
Yeah, you'll hear from a man who says he was raped on the school's campus, then given nearly a $500,000 settlement to keep quiet. Kimberly Kerr traveled to Texas to sit down with the alleged victim.
Richard Winman says he was only 12 years old when it started. He lived near Jesuit High School at the time, where he and other neighborhood children loved playing on the school's basketball court. Winman wasn't a Jesuit student, but he says Pete Modica, a janitor at the school, would bring him on campus often. That's where he says Modica raped him.
It started out with oral sex, just Pete Modica. And it graduated to sodomy. I was sodomized. One time it was in a chapel at Jesuit High School, and one of the teachers came in and discovered me and Pete Modica when he was performing oral sex on me. And I thought it was over. I thought a responsible adult had discovered us. And he yelled, he said, "Pete, God damn it," is what he said. But he never said anything.
In a separate incident, Winman says priest and theology teacher Cornelius Neil Carr also walked in on the sexual abuse.
Later on, when he graduated to sodomy, Father Cornelius Carr came into Pete's office and discovered us. And I thought, wow, the priest knows now it's going to end. And he took his hand and put it on my back and said, "Relax." And then he masturbated while Pete was sodomizing me.
Fox 8 typically doesn't identify sexual assault victims, and at the time of this interview, we chose not to identify Winman, but he has agreed to allow us to report his name and show his face. We've also obtained what appears to be a draft settlement agreement faxed to Jesuit High School in November 2012. It lays out a confidential settlement between Winman and Jesuit High regarding the alleged sexual abuse, where Winman would be paid $450,000.
Do you believe there was a cover-up here?
Absolutely. Look at the documentation. It's the shut the up documentation.
It wasn't until 2012 that Winman decided to come forward when news of the Penn State sex abuse scandal broke, and assistant coach Jerry Sandusky was accused of sex crimes against young boys.
The Sandusky case was the tipping point for me. It was the catalyst for me coming forward. At that point, I saw the revolt, and I couldn't be silent anymore.
He decided to email the then president of Jesuit, Father Raymond Fitzgerald, because he says he needed counseling.
When you go through the process, they make you go to a psychologist that they hire that works for the Jesuits. And they do that for their due diligence to find out if you're credible or not. And if they determine that you are credible, then you go into mediation and a settlement is worked out.
We've obtained an audio recording of a meeting between Winman and Fitzgerald discussing that settlement.
I would say the first impression that I've gotten, and this has been confirmed over and over again, is that the circumstances, the physical layout, the fact that Modica would bring neighborhood children onto campus was confirmed. I'm morally convinced that what you told me was true.
Now, Winman has decided to go public with his story. We were the only television station to interview him at his home near Fort Worth, Texas.
But you know, at 53 years old, nobody gives a shit that I was raped. But now is the time to protect our children.
New at 5, an attorney for a sexual abuse victim who landed a large settlement against the Archdiocese says more potential victims are coming forward. The victim says things should have never gone this far.
The church is vowing to do more to prevent the problem, saying no one should suffer abuse by a church leader. Rob Masson has the story.
Attorney Roger Stetter has litigated nearly 80 cases against the Archdiocese of New Orleans. Last week, Stetter landed a $500,000 settlement from the Archdiocese for a man who said teacher and deacon George Brignac raped and sexually abused him at Holy Rosary Church, a man Fox 8 is not identifying.
Found me at the school by his desk, in his car, and in his home.
Now Stetter says more alleged victims are calling his office.
I've already had a couple of 3 calls. I have a client I'm seeing on Thursday. I have another boy who was abused at a Holy Rosary who I'm seeing next week. I think there'll be others.
Brignac taught at 3 local Catholic schools in the late 70s. The Jefferson Parish DA's office prosecuted him for allegedly abusing 3 young boys at St. Matthew's in River Ridge back in 1978. Brignac was acquitted, and the Archdiocese then moved him across the parish line to Holy Rosary School in New Orleans. There in 1979, this victim accused Brignac of abusing him for 3 years, beginning when he was 8 years old.
I was an altar boy, and the church, in their infinite wisdom, decided to make him head of the altar boys.
The victim says Brignac raped and abused him at church, in his car, and at his home across the street from the church.
He raped me many different occasions in different places.
For his part, Archbishop Gregory Amen was not available to go on camera Wednesday, but offered this statement. My heart and my prayers go out to the victims of sexual abuse. We take all allegations seriously and investigate them thoroughly. I continue to offer to meet with victims to share with them our compassion and sincere concern of the church and to enable healing to begin.
As a child, I felt guilty, I felt scared, I felt intimidated, and I didn't express to anybody what was going on.
A former teacher and church deacon at the center of a sex abuse scandal tells Fox 8 he never molested any boys.
Now, after the Archdiocese of New Orleans paid out a $500,000 abuse settlement this month, George Brignac maintains he's done nothing wrong. Rob Masson has the exclusive story.
Mr. Brignac? A former altar boy accused George Brignac of raping him when the boy was just 8 years old. Now the former deacon and teacher answers our questions about the Archdiocese's settlement with the victim. Do you think the church should have paid that out?
I can't say that for the Archbishop. I'm not in his mind.
The abuse started in 1979 and carried on for 3 years. The victim, who we're not identifying, says the memories of Brignac's abuse are still fresh.
Found on me at the school, by his desk, in his car, and in his home.
Do you make any apologies to the boys who claim you abused them, sir?
I've always been apologetic to anything I did wrong, if I did anything wrong.
The victim is now 52 years old. Memories of the abuse were suppressed until last year when Brignac ran into the victim's mother at the store.
She had seen him, and he had asked about me, and at the end of their conversation, made sure to tell me that he loved me.
In fact, the victim still has greeting cards sent to him by Brignac expressing his fondness.
All my teaching career, I've loved and taken care of my students and my family, and I've lost all of them.
When you abuse a child sexually, not only do you rob the child of his innocence and of his childhood, but the damage, the harm that's been done, it remains. It doesn't go away.
This afternoon, Archbishop Gregory Amen acknowledged the church's sins of the past and said strong steps have been taken to prevent more abuse.
In 2002, the bishops came together in a time of great difficulty, and we came up with the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People. And that charter requires anyone who works with youth and young adults to go through a background check and also a course in safe environment.
Those people, they need to be weeded out. I know that Gregory Amen wants that.
During the 1979 trial in which he was acquitted, Brignac maintained his innocence and did so again today, in spite of the recently paid settlement.
What we look for are credible allegations. And what we're dealing with now with Mr. Brignac is a credible allegation.
Did you molest any boys, sir?
No.
The Archdiocese of New Orleans identified 57 people.
We got in touch with 2 in the list to get their reaction. As Amanda Roberts reports, one former priest says he regrets his actions.
Of the 57 clergy members identified on the Archbishop's list, 14 are still living. When reached for comment, Lawrence Hecker couldn't be reached, neither could James Kilgore, Gerald Prince, or Patrick Sanders. But when reached at his home, John Sachs admitted to being one of the 57 on the list.
The list is out there. I have nothing to say about it. My name's on it. I have nothing to say.
Do you apologize to any
I've already done that 17 years ago. I apologized then. I apologize now. I'm sorry. I regret what I did. The name is correct. It's on the list. I'm sorry. That's all I can say. I'm sorry and I regret it.
Do you hope for anything?
Sorry and I regret it.
Do you hope for anything in the future?
Forgiveness. That's all.
According to the Times-Picayune, Sachs admitted to sexually abusing an altar boy at St. Peter's Catholic Church in the 1980s after a lawsuit was filed in 2001. He assumed various ministry assignments since he was first ordained in 1973 in New Orleans, Metairie, Kenner, and Reserve. In 2004, he was removed from ministry. Fox 8 reached defrocked Deacon James Lockwood by phone.
This has been so long ago, I can't remember the details.
Lockwood was arrested on charges in 1978 for crimes against nature and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. His alleged victims were 11 and 12 years old, and he was removed from ministry in 1978.
Another alleged sex abuse victim is suing the Archdiocese of New Orleans for failing to protect him.
Morris Daniels says defrocked Deacon George Brignac raped him repeatedly, and the church knew about it. Amanda Roberts joins us tonight with more.
Decades after the abuse, Morris Daniels says he wants to tell his story to protect other children from abuse. Normally, Fox 8 does not identify alleged victims of sexual abuse, but in this case, Daniels says he did not want to hide in the shadows.
I'm Morris Daniels.
As a 7th grader at Holy Rosary in the 1980s, Morris Daniels says he had dreams to become a Catholic priest, but instead lived the worst year of his life.
It is painful. It's humiliating.
Daniel says he was bullied at school when Deacon George Brignac stepped in and stopped it.
He befriended me and bought me things, and we got really close.
Daniel says the friendship came at a price. The lawsuit outlines how Brignac started to sexually abuse Daniels in the boys' bathroom at Holy Rosary. It then escalated to sodomy when Brignac would drive him off campus in his car.
Being raped, being in the back of his car. And as a kid, I didn't see anything wrong with this. He told me he loved me. He told me I was special. He told me this was our secret.
Daniel says he thought he buried those memories until he recognized one of his friends recounting his story of abuse in a news report.
I didn't know that he was being raped also. These memories came flooding back. I'm almost 50. These things hit me like a ton of bricks.
After battling substance abuse, several failed marriages, and failed businesses, Daniel says he wants to shine a light on his story so other children won't have to go through what he did.
They're supposed to protect you from harm and not take advantage of you.
Attorney Roger Stetter says they tried to settle Daniel's case in mediation without much success.
The church started to nickel and dime my clients.
The lawsuit, now filed in civil court, Stetter says he hopes the church sees Daniels and other victims and has empathy for what they've been through. He says if mediation doesn't work, there are more lawsuits in waiting.
I'm going to file those cases. They're going to be hit with 2 more rape suits in January. They're going to be hit with a rape suit in February, and they may be hit with another one in March. Do they really want me to go to war? Do they want to go to war with me? I'm not afraid of litigation.
Now, a volunteer firefighter in North Carolina, Daniel says he struggles returning to his New Orleans hometown.
Sitting right here, this is the roughest. Dealing with what this man did to me and my friends, this is the roughest. And I don't want it to happen to anyone else.
Especially because he knows defrocked Deacon Brignac.
Did you molest any boys, sir?
No.
Is still sitting at home, while Daniel says he struggles every day.
I've had a lot of things happen in my life that possibly wouldn't have happened had the Catholic Church protected me like they should have, instead of putting me with a monster.